This is the start of my new channel, Freeway Flyers. My name is Zachary Zabale. I've been an ESL teacher for about 14 years. So I know a lot of the pain points or a lot of the issues that the teachers deal with. You know, I love my job, I love my career, but it's not without its challenges. I see myself as a public servant, as somebody who tries to inspire and guide my students. But it's not always easy. Sometimes we're doing it with limited amounts of energy. You know, we lead with our heart. I think the best teachers do that. They lead with their heart. But sometimes you get burnt out. That's the life of an adjunct. And here on this channel, we're going to discuss the adjunct life. It's called Freeway Flyers because, as you know, that's a term that's used by adjuncts. You know, we have to piecemeal a salary, although piecemeal sounds harsh, but that's what we do to earn the equivalent of a full-time job. Some of us teach in person at 3 schools. This is my wife that's kissing me right now, and she's my support system. Let's talk about burnout. If you're like me, you've reached a point several times in your career where you're just like, gosh, I can't do this anymore, right? Come on, we've all been there. You know, if you're like me, just before class starts, you're just like, you want to be any other place but there. And it doesn't start off that way, right? Especially when you start off earlier in career or even in different parts of the year. You feel great, right? Especially if you're fresh in the middle of the term or you just come back from Christmas vacation and, you're ready to go. But sometimes, and it can hit at any time, you get really burnt out, especially if you're working at multiple schools. Like for me, I'm working at 3 community colleges, and sometimes you reach a point where you're just like, can't do it. Especially me, I work off limited amounts of sleep. I don't have the best sleeping habits. My morning class, I got to drive about 50 minutes away, which isn't terrible, but my class the night before ends at 10. So think about that turnaround time. And that's tough, and that grind has been tough. And I personally have suffered from burnout, and I absolutely love my students. To me, my students are my second family. You know, you always draw that line. It's not like you can say, hey, let's go hang out, right? But I care about who they are. I care about how they're doing. I care about their families. I care if they're learning. I care if, are they putting food on the table? Are they hungry? Are they stressing? Are they suffering from anxiety? How do they feel? So I really care about my students. But sometimes you only have so much to give. You've already given everything you have. And I think if you've really been called to this vocation, how I like to think of it, somehow you always rise to the occasion. For me, I could dread minutes before the class starts. Then I walk in, and sometimes you don't even want to look at your students. You're just like I said, you want to be anywhere but there. But then as the class goes on, you find your groove. That little bit of energy that you have is all the energy that you need. I just saw a video where this guy who was in the CIA was saying that the best spies have a certain level of anxiety. because as a spy, you have to be really observant of your environment. You have to be constantly observing who's around you, where you are, what's your situation. And I think having anxiety in the same way in teaching is a sign that you truly care. You care about the outcome. You care that the class goes well. If you had zero anxiety, and I visualized this before, if you were somebody who just walks into class and you're like, you know what, I could care less whether this class is successful today or not, you know, if you have that attitude, like, because I know people will say, well, you know, you can't be attached to the outcome. You know, like in sports, you do the best you can and it doesn't matter if you win or lose. But I think when it comes to teaching, you have a responsibility to your students. Your students depend on you, especially in our minds. That's at the forefront. Our students depend on us to be educated, to learn. They depend on us to be taught well, right? And I think it's fine to have that level of anxiety. Not a high level of anxiety where it's debilitating, but to the point where you care so much it kind of gives you an ache inside. But if you're like me, once you start teaching, you find your groove right away. I guess my point is, even when you're burnt out, for me, even though I'm burnt out, my body and my mind and my soul, you know, my heart will find a way to get it done. And sure enough, you enter this flow state where all that anxiety that I had just kind of just melts away. And that's what happens about 99% of the time, or, you know, maybe 95% of the time. But there are times where you're just not your best self, which is very rare. I'm sure if you guys really think about all the times you've really fallen flat on your face, I'm sure it's very few. I think teachers that truly care rarely fall flat on their face unless they're either really sick or something's really going on in their lives. Or maybe that last bit of energy you need to kind of to finish, to continue, you just don't have it. And then your mind gets really scattered. What really happens to me, I think the times where I'll interpret it as falling on my face, maybe my students wouldn't feel that way, was when I'm not prepared. I think the one thing that can kill a class for me in my mind is to not be prepared. Some teachers can wing it, and there's some courses you can wing it. For me, teaching pronunciation comes very natural to me. It took a lot of time to get good, but I've come to a point where I've done it so many times, I could just open the book and just start teaching. Where other class, like I teach a high advanced class, a level 6 class at a community college, and you better have some kind of direction of where you want to go, right? You can't just show up, right? So circling back to anxiety, if you have a little bit of anxiety that day and you have zero preparation and you're tired, I think those are just a few risk factors that will compound, you know, kind of, and like I said, like failing classes are very rare, but, you know, you put yourself in a certain mental position where you're just like, oh gosh, I'm tired, I'm not prepared. Students see it in my face, they can feel it. Oh no, that student just yawned. Oh no, that student isn't paying attention. I'm failing, you know. And that's happened to all of us, you know. But anyway, with this video, I wanted to just talk about a couple of things, you know, burnout and, you know, dealing with anxiety, those contributing factors like a lack of preparation, low energy, you know, it all happens to us. But I think, to sum up, I think the key thing is we rarely fail. even if you have anxiety, the fact that you know you're burning out, I think is as a sign at least that you care. You care about what you're producing. You care about the class. It's a good sign. I think somebody who's truly burnt out, I've never been, like a true pure burnout, I think is you just stop caring. Like, you know what, screw it. I don't care if this class succeeds or not. I've never been there, and I'm sure many of you haven't been there. But if you have, sorry to hear that. Maybe, we all need a break. I know I need breaks. Maybe you need a break. But I think if you've been called to this vocation, I think we will always find the little bit we need, the little bit of energy we need to get it done, And but anyway, this is my first video. This is Zach signing off on Freeway Flyers. Have a good evening. Thank you.